Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I'm scared. Totally. It's bad. Well, I don't know. I could be next.
3 people dead, 2 injured. Fears in Langley as a killer stalked the streets overnight. Also,
I'm deeply sorry. I humbly beg forgiveness.
The Pope in Canada, an apology for the actions of members of the Catholic Church in residential schools. And
making just in a public appearance, just in one place, doesn't cut it.
the path to healing. BC survivors of residential schools react to that papal apology.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lien Yeung. If you were awoken this morning by an emergency alert, you weren't alone. But that message at 6:20 a.m. came hours after a man was stalking the streets of Langley, shooting and killing. 2 people are dead, 2 more are injured, 1 severely, and that suspect dead. Police suspect this was a targeted attack, and as Benit Brach joins us live now from Langley with the very latest.
Well, Leanne, it's been a very heavy day for many. Parts of the city are still, sectioned off with crime tape behind me. And there's still so many unanswered questions like the motive. It all began in the early hours of the morning when a suspect moving through Langley streets shot 4 people, killing 2 before confronting police.
Police fired their weapons and fatally shot the male.
Police have determined the suspect's identity, but aren't releasing it yet.
We have a lot of information to cover. We're interviewing the suspect's family and associates, and hopefully through that information we'll be able to piece together what happened.
Police believe the shootings lasted 5 hours, the gunman striking at multiple locations, killing 1 man at the bus loop, another near a supporting housing project. He shot 1 woman who remains in critical condition. Another man has a gunshot wound to the leg. Police initially told CBC News the victims were all vulnerable people facing homelessness, but have since said that remains under investigation.
It is too early to say that right now, exactly who they are.
The mayor of Langley urged the community to pull together in the face of tragedy.
It's with a very heavy heart that I'm here, and our hearts, thoughts, and prayers go out to all those affected families and friends of those that were involved.
But the shooting has left many in the community on edge.
Were they innocent victims? That's the thing. I don't want to get shot at.
Well, I don't know. I could be next. Nobody knows.
It's not something that we want to continue around here. It's not a good feeling.
And just moments ago, Leanne, police have identified the suspect as 28-year-old Jordan Godgen from Surrey. They say he was known to them, but had what they're calling a non-criminal contract. He was shot and killed by officers on scene. The IIO is investigating, and more to this, police are still investigating if the suspect acted alone and are asking the public for any information. For now, the community is just filled with fear and grief. Leanne?
Thank you so much, Benit. Benit Brach reporting live from Langley for us tonight. Homicide investigators have charged 2 men following yesterday's brazen daytime shooting in Whistler Village that left 2 men dead. Gursimran Sahota and Tanvir Kak have both been charged with first-degree murder after shooting Maninder Dhaliwal and Satindera Gill outside the Sandal Hotel in Whistler. Dhaliwal, who was involved with the gang Brothers Keepers, died at the scene, while Gill died from his injuries at a nearby health center.
Unfortunately, here in British Columbia, for several decades, we've had an ongoing issue, ebb and flow of gang violence in our communities. The individuals that we believed involved in this latest incident in Whistler have a long-standing history, and their gangs have a long-standing history of conflict. And as always, this is dominated by drug trade, personal revenge, and market control of illicit substances.
Police say they are working on protocol to mitigate future gang violence moving forward. Meanwhile, police say the hunt for a suspect after 2 women were shot and killed in Chillwack is over. Mounties say the man they're looking for is dead. On Thursday, IHID announced it was searching for 50-year-old Eric John Chestelow after 2 women were gunned down in a house just east of downtown Chillwack. A man was also shot but will survive. Police say they found a Jeep that Sheshlo was driving the next day in Bridal Falls, and later they found his body. Officers say he ended his own life. Today in Maskwacis, south of Edmonton, Pope Francis uttered the word that so many survivors of residential schools and their families have been waiting to hear. I am sorry. He begged for forgiveness, though stopped short of taking full responsibility for the actions of the Catholic Church. The pontiff addressed a crowd of thousands gathered in person and extending his message to Indigenous communities across the country. CBC's Olivia Stefanovich was there and has this report.
An act of repentance. The head of the Roman Catholic Church praying over the graves of generations, lives cut short by its institutions. Then at the grounds of the former school, where the church's abuse ran rampant and unchecked.
It is a blessing to receive and host you.
Pope Francis sought atonement by 4 teepees representing the 4 nations of Maskwacis, and a 5th symbolizing the entrance to the residential school that once stood.
You have traveled a long way to be with us on our land and to walk with us on the path of reconciliation.
The very culture that the church tried to destroy on full display, along with the names of more than 4,000 children who either died or never returned from residential schools.
I have come to your native lands to tell you in person of my sorrow, to implore God's forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation.
Pope Francis apologized for the ways in which Christians supported colonizing mentality and forced assimilation. But as in Rome, he did not apologize for the role of the Catholic Church as an institution. He spoke of the actions of members and communities.
I am deeply sorry. I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the Indigenous peoples.
But begging pardon is not enough, something the Pope acknowledged.
An important part of this process will be to conduct a serious investigation into the facts of what took place in the past and to assist the survivors of the residential schools to experience healing from the traumas they suffered.
Along with an apology, Pope Francis returned the moccasins given to him by residential school survivors and Indigenous leaders in Rome, a pledge from him to continue walking the path toward reconciliation. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Maskwacis.
Outside of Maskwacis, it was also an emotional day for many residential school survivors who gathered here in BC to watch the Pope. For some, the gesture was an opportunity for healing, while others were left underwhelmed by the pontiff's words. As John Hernandez reports, there are hopes that the apology can lead to concrete action. And a warning, some of the details in this story are distressing.
Even from afar, the Pope's words were enough to trigger haunting memories and the tears that follow.
The sexual abuse impacted a lot. The physical abuse impacted me a lot.
John Jones, a survivor of a residential school in Port Alberni, among many across the country watching the Pope from a distance and reminded of the pain caused by church members.
Anytime I seen my friends speaking their traditional language, they would ask us to form a circle, and we would witness them being beat up for speaking their language.
Church members that the Pope once again apologized on behalf of, this time on Canadian soil near Edmonton. The magnitude of the gesture not lost on survivors at this viewing, which provided them with emotional and spiritual support.
It draws up a lot of energy and emotions that a lot of people don't really realize that they're carrying.
Organizer Angela White leads a survivors society and was left feeling hopeful.
His words and his actions today were a lot more sincere and went a lot further than they did before.
But if there's one thing attendees here will tell you, it's that the path to healing is different for everyone, and an apology isn't always heard the same way.
Making just a public appearance just in one place doesn't cut it. It's not just one nation, it's the nations of North America that got victimized by residential schools.
There's disappointment from some that there was no expression of sorrow on behalf of the church as a whole, along with the notable absence of an action plan to repair much of the harm which the pontiff conceded had catastrophic consequences.
The Pope would have been a lot more forceful if he said, and we have a plan to implement reconciliation, for instance, dissolving the doctrine of discovery, among other things, releasing the records.
A long road to redemption that many here will tell you only begins with sorry. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
And understandably, the apology is triggering strong emotions. Here is Anita Nafajo, a member of the Okanagan Indian Band. She shared with the CBC today.
I was sitting in the dealership thinking of the kids that didn't make it home and grateful that my grandma did and my dad did, because I wouldn't be here. My kids wouldn't be here. They're not a part of this 215, but they could have played with those kids. Those could have been their friends. That could have been somebody they were a roommate with.
This coverage can be upsetting and bring on painful feelings or memories. If you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach the National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. It runs 24 hours and is available for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and their loved ones. A disgraced former social worker in Kelowna who defrauded vulnerable children in his care has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Robert Riley Saunders pleaded guilty last year. Most of the victims were Indigenous youth. As Joseph Otu reports, one First Nations leader questions whether justice has been served.
Judge Stephen Wilson says Riley Robert Saunders' main motivation was greed. And as the gatekeeper of government resources, he took advantage of the youth in his care. In BC Supreme Court in Kelowna, he sentenced Saunders to 5 years in prison for fraud and 2 years for breach of trust, which will be served concurrently. He also sentenced him to 1 month in jail for forgery. The Crown wanted Saunders to serve between 6 and 8 years behind bars, while the defense argued for 2 years of house arrest, followed by 3 years of probation. Last September, Saunders pleaded guilty to defrauding the Ministry of Children and Family Development of almost $500,000. The victims were mostly Indigenous youth in his care. Many clients claimed they were left homeless because of what Saunders did. Some said they suffered physical and sexual abuse and ended up living with addiction. Chief Greg Gabriel of the Penticton Indian Band feels the sentence was too lenient for the damage Saunders caused.
The children that were under his care and suffered more pain and loss of proper care will carry that forever.
Saunders expressed very little emotion as the sentence was read out. Before today's hearing, he expressed his sincere remorse, saying sorry to the children, the families, and his co-workers who were all impacted by his actions. Saunders has been out on bail since his arrest in December of 2020. Bailiffs took him directly into custody following today's hearing. Joseph Otu, CBC News, Kelowna.
The jury in the sexual assault trial of former Vancouver Canuck Jake Virtanen started deliberations today. The Crown and Defence Counsel finished their closing arguments, focusing on the reliability of witness testimony. Defense insists the testimony was riddled with inconsistencies. Crown Counsel argued that failing to remember does not detract from the strength of the alleged victim's evidence, that she repeatedly told Virtanen that she did not want to have sex. The trial for a former BC cabinet minister and high-profile Indigenous leader, Grand Chief Ed John, begins today. The 4-day jury trial will unfold at Prince George Supreme Court. In November of 2019, John was charged with 4 counts of sex crimes dating back to 1974. The Crown alleges he sexually assaulted a girl in the northern city. According to the victim, she was just 13 years old when the alleged assaults took place. John is a hereditary chief of the Tlaxten Nation, a lawyer and former minister for children and families. Well, the heat has quickly turned up, and it's expected to get even hotter and drier this week. It's a warning for seniors and vulnerable people in the province to be prepared. As Tom Popick reports from the Okanagan, the forecast is calling for temperatures as high as 40 degrees.
It sure felt like summer this weekend.
Oh gosh, yes. Hopefully enjoying the lake. I'm thinking about parasailing actually.
But people along Kelowna's lakeshore are now preparing for scorching heat.
Probably stay inside the house with the air conditioners on, keep the blinds closed.
I'm more worried about other people than I am for my own self.
For good reason.
Yesterday we had 15 sudden deaths.
Last summer's heat dome claimed more than 600 lives. The provincial government, health authorities, and emergency officials face severe criticism for their preparation and response to the crisis. But for almost a week now, they've all issued a steady stream of tweets and messages about the warming temperatures. On Friday, the province announced a new heat warning alert system is ready to go.
These things can happen very, very quickly.
BC Seniors advocate Isabel McKenzie is adding her voice to the chorus of government warnings, calling on people to check in regularly with older family members and friends to make sure they're staying cool and hydrated this week.
People didn't die from the temperature outside, they died from the temperature inside.
Temperatures are not expected to break last summer's records. The lower mainland and island could hit 30 degrees Celsius, hotter moving inland with the Kamloops region edging closer to 40 degrees. The plan for people here in the Okanagan:
let other people into my own house where I have air conditioning and this and that.
To cool off however you can. Tom Popick, CBC News, Kelowna.
With the arrival of the heat, cooling centers will be opening up tomorrow to help people escape the sizzling temperatures. Among the cities with pop-up cooling centers is Kamloops. You can visit the Sandman Center at 300 Lawrence Street. It will be open from noon to 8 p.m. And over in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley, a number of community centers and libraries are opening their doors. You can head to Emergency Info BC's website to search for misting and cooling centers near you. And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. So, Jo, how hot are we expecting it to get during the week?
Yeah, Leanne, if you thought today was hot, tomorrow significantly warmer across much of BC, and then we will stay at those elevated temperatures through to next weekend. So it's not just the numbers we're hitting, but how long this heat wave is expected to last. Let me show you the humidex values right now across the South Coast. This is what it feels like when you factor in the humidity, and the humidity is what makes it hard for your body to cool down. Right now across Metro Vancouver, feeling like the low 30s. In the Fraser Valley, though, feeling like the mid to high 30s. And tomorrow, probably 3 to 5 degrees warmer across the province. Here are those heat warnings. They extend almost right across BC, central and northern coastal sections and parts of the Kootenays, the exception. Everyone else, this extreme heat is going to be dangerous. High pressure has set up off the coast, and that clockwise flow is what will funnel that heat from the interior through our valleys towards the coast. This is our hottest setup. Here's a look at tomorrow's highs without the humidity. So hitting the mid 30s without the humidity tomorrow. Leanne, while not quite as hot as the heat dome last year, as we've been saying, we could still break all-time July records because a lot of our heat dome all-time records broke in June. So dangerous heat set for tomorrow. We'll be watching this one closely.
Wow, for sure. I hope people take advantage of those cooling centers. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
It's the start of Vancouver Pride Week, and the Pride flags were raised at City Hall in celebration.
The idea that City Council raises flags in our city is incredibly important when we consider that in places not very far from here, sidewalks are being defaced, youth dances, queer dances are being victimized online. So we need to be ever vigilant. This is a time to celebrate, but it is also a time to take up space and remind people that we're here, we're queer, and we're not going anywhere.
The transgender flag and Progress Pride flag are now flying on the North Lawn near Cambie and West 12th. The Two-Spirit Pride flags from the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh Nations and the Greater Vancouver Native Cultural Society are also on display. Vancouver Pride Week runs from today until July 31st. And quite the golden moment for Canada at the World Athletics Championships over the weekend. The men's 4x100 meter relay topped the podium in Eugene, Oregon, and outpaced the U.S. sprinters in front of a raucous American crowd. It's the first time this has happened since the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games. Here's how the race played out on Saturday night. Take a look.
And they're away, a good start. Aaron Brown, such a good bend runner, is charging very hard in lane number 4. But Christian Coleman making up some ground as they go through the first exchange. The Americans are flying, so are the British. Zarnell Hughes outside in lane number 6. Down the back straight for Canada, Jerome Blake. Handing off now to Brendan Rodney. Rodney with a great run, being tracked down on the inside by the United States, Elijah Hall. Through the exchange, Canada in second. The Americans botch up the exchange. Andre DeGrasse has the lead. Here comes Marvin Bracey. DeGrasse with the lead. Canada wins the gold.
There we go with the gold. The Canadians laid down the fastest time of any relay so far this season. They're 37.48 seconds, setting a national record. As you heard there, Andre DeGrasse ran the anchor leg, and Kelowna's Jerome Blake ran second, keeping Canada out front.
Once I hand the baton off, I'm all the way at the other side of the track. So my main objective was just I was trying to look on the screen to see, but the screen was looking very weird. I couldn't really see what was going on. So I started running. And while I'm running around the turn, I saw them celebrate, and I was like, wait, did we win? And then I saw the Canadian fans jumping, and then they were saying Canada. So I was running backwards, looking on the screen just to make sure we didn't get DQ. And then they said, and then that's when the numbers came up, and I was like, whoa, we won. So I started running down the track, celebrating and jumping and screaming. So it felt pretty good.
Pretty good indeed. Blake moved to BC from Jamaica, and as a teenager, he trained first in Kelowna with the Okanagan Athletic Club, and then the Coquitlam Cheetahs, before bringing home this gold medal from the Worlds. Blake also won Olympic bronze with Canada's men's relay team at the Tokyo Summer Games. An apology from the Pope. How are Canadian Catholics reacting to the papal call for forgiveness and healing? That's next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Service dogs are an integral part of the daily lives of many people with disabilities, but the pandemic is being blamed for a serious shortage of the animals in the Edmonton area. Katerina Schultz has more on how the lengthening wait lists have now prompted advocates to put out a call for help.
Yes! Good dog!
For many people with disabilities, a service dog is a lifeline. But due to COVID-19, Edmonton is critically short on the volunteers needed to train them.
Post-COVID, though, and through COVID, it's been quite interesting how things have changed. And I think what's happening now is that a lot of people have started to travel and do things differently where they've not been able to get out and about. And so there's a bit of a crunch now trying to find valuable volunteers to actually take the dogs in.
While in training, service dogs must learn all the skills needed for their particular job, whether that's helping someone with PTSD or mobility aids, or supporting someone who has autism or anxiety. Each dog takes about 2 years to train, and that means people can spend years on a wait list before they ever get their dog.
There's such a need for service dogs that, like right now, we're looking for 10 more.
Carly Neese, who has cerebral palsy, had to wait a year for Gilmore, her second service dog.
I feel so lucky that I get to take my dog wherever I go, but without my dog, I wouldn't be able to do half of what I do within the day. Like, my energy would be expended by noon.
But others aren't so lucky. Service dogs aren't bred unless there's a foster family ready to raise them.
Volunteers are the heartbeat of creating a service dog team. We're always looking for volunteers that are helping to change someone's life.
John Dunn is one of about 50 Edmonton volunteers raising service dogs, and although it's a big job, he says it's completely worth it.
There is no burden. There's responsibility, but it's not a burden. And then obviously for my family, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience because it's like seeing your children grow.
Turn left. Good. Turn right. With no end in sight to the backlog, advocates are hoping they see an increase in volunteers soon. Katarina Schultz, CBC News, Edmonton.
Esperaba que llegara este momento para estar entre ustedes. Desde aquí, desde este lugar tristemente evocativo, quisiera comenzar lo que deseo en mi interior, una peregrinación penitencial. Pienso en el drama sufrido por tantos de ustedes, por sus familias, por sus comunidades, en lo que ustedes compartieron conmigo sobre los sufrimientos padecidos en las escuelas residenciales. Me encuentro entre ustedes porque el primer paso de esta peregrinación penitencial es el de renovar mi pedido de perdón y decirles de todo corazón que estoy profundamente dolido.
The Pope came to Canada to make that apology to Indigenous people. But for many of the millions of Catholics in this country, his presence here is a profound event. Karen Paul's got some of their impressions of their church and its leader.
That I am deeply sorry.
Watching Pope Francis apologize, this priest was visibly moved.
I ask forgiveness.
One thing that's just struck to my heart, I think was struck to the heart of all the parishioners here, is how families were, taken apart.
He represents an established Ukrainian community in Winnipeg's North End. They're occupied with the war in Ukraine, but still want to be part of this journey to reconciliation.
Moving forward, how do we move forward?
These women went to Mass after watching the apology.
I felt for all the mothers and the fathers whose children were taken away from them.
My greatest hope is that with prayers and with understanding and with peace, our Indigenous brothers and sisters would be at peace.
But many Indigenous people say they wanted to hear the Pope apologize on behalf of the Catholic Church and not just individual members. But there may be a reason he didn't. Experts point to an important distinction in Catholic theology. While Christians are human and sinful, the Church represents God, who can do no wrong.
He acknowledged the complicity of individuals, I think including leaders, but individuals rather than the church.
Because I'm on my healing journey already. Back in Winnipeg, this mother of three spent much of her day off watching coverage of the Pope's visit.
He sent blankets, and my babies died.
Troubled by stories of elders neglected and abused as children.
The Catholic Church was a significant part of this experience and this trauma. We can't, as a church, as a community, dictate what they need. We need to ask them what they need from us.
A big task that has only just begun. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For more on what we've heard from the Pope so far today, I'm joined by Chief Judy Wilson. She is the chief of the Neshkonlith Indian Band and Secretary-Treasurer for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. So, Chief Wilson, you were there today inside the Arbor when the Pope spoke in Moskowitz this morning. What went through your head as you listened to his apology?
Well, I was thinking of the survivors, of course. My dad, who went to residential school age 5 to 16, and my aunt that just passed away. She went to the Kamloops residential school as well. And I really felt that the Pope's apology still doesn't accept the role of the church in the residential school system and blames, some of the other nuns and priests and not the Catholic Church. I just didn't hear that. And his statement that, I listened to completely avoids the responsibility of the papal bulls sanctioning Europe's sovereignty to claim, occupy, and settle our territories and resources in the Western Hemisphere. That's why I got up and I jumped up and I just had to say it. I said repudiate the doctrine of discovery, renounce the papal bulls and end genocide. I felt so compelled to do that because it needed to be said.
Yeah, I remember hearing your voice this morning as we were going through that broadcast. So the doctrines of discovery that you're about to, I'm just going to, lay it out for our viewers in case they're not familiar. These were edicts from the Pope issued in the 15th century, which gave powers to nations to take over lands as their own and subdue the people who live there and convert them to Christianity. And of course, many Indigenous people felt their negative impact. So, Chief Wilson, what would it mean to you for the church to rescind the doctrines?
Well, I think the papal bulls also denied the humanity of our Indigenous peoples, and while asserting their supremacy and the domination that led not only to the land thefts, but the justification of what the Indian Act became, and then what the residential schools had, were across Canada, and also passed those laws what became in Canada too, like the Indian Act and the legislation, all the genocide legislation we know about. One thing I was thinking about too is that the Pope's statement doesn't give direction to the Vatican, the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops and local groups to return our cultural material, our records and data, they how did they get in their hands? We know how that got in their hands, and to open the church archives to allow the researchers to help answer the questions, the data that will help answer those about the administration of residential schools, because that's going to be really important about the discussions about like the 215 at the Kamloops Residential School, and many of the communities, nations across Canada are still unearthing mass graves and burial sites and going through all of these atrocities and, the truth that needs to come out. He needs to at least commit to the church to these actions and develop a plan that we can at least, talk about, because he talked about the apology. Those are good words, and maybe a lot of the people were waiting for them for a long time for closure. But the real closure we need is the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, and also that the renouncement of those papal bulls that asserted a lot of the Vatican and the European authority and supremacy across our lands. And, we all know that's fiction, but we need the highest church of lands, the Pope, we need the Queen and Trudeau to repudiate that.
Interesting. So you certainly saw there were some missing pieces in the Pope's apology today. But today's remarks is just the first of his public addresses while he's here in Canada. The doctrines have been brought up to him before. Do you expect that he might raise the issue later, along with some of the other pieces you mentioned, like the archives, like the data and the records?
These things are all highly charged and emotional, but the real work has to be done because with the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, otherwise we're still locked in under those fictitious laws and genocide of our people. We need to change that. We need to change it now.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Judy Wilson. We'll be listening to what the Pope has to say in the days to come, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you again. This is Chief Judy Wilson from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Following the Pope's apology, Chief Wilton Littlechild gave the pontiff a traditional Indian headdress. During that moment, an Indigenous woman stood up and sang "O Canada" in Cree. It was unplanned, and her performance was raw and emotional. A reminder, if you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach the National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. It operates 24 hours and is available to anyone. After a widespread outage paralyzed a large amount of Canada, Rogers is answering questions about what went wrong. The telecom hot seat, that's next.
Howard Hughes is up there. At least he's up there according to the best evidence we have at the moment, which is about a teacup's worth. But the mystery billionaire, as he's called, has apparently rented the entire 20th floor and part of the 19th at the Bayshore Inn here in Vancouver for an indefinite period of time, whatever that may mean. In any event, that's the word we have from the executive offices in the hotel, and in keeping with the Hughes penchant for secrecy, it's the only word we have. So far, there's been nothing but an overworked rumor mill here concerning the length of the Hughes stay, although the hotel has been canceling previous commitments for the top 2 floors. Hughes and his male staff of 14 did not use the regular entrance at the Bayshore. They arrived early yesterday morning and went straight to the hotel tower by a side door. No one saw them, no one heard them.
We didn't know definitely that Mr. Hughes would arrive until he was actually in the hotel. The reservations and arrangements were made a couple days in advance, and it was treated as though he had been in the hotel for a couple of days before he actually arrived. So we did not know exactly when he came, nor were we able to witness the party's arrival at our drive-in entrance to the hotel tower.
Did anybody see Mr. Hughes arrive?
None of our staff.
The inevitable hunt for Mr. Hughes, or someone at least on his staff, comes to its inevitable conclusion aboard the one elevator still in service to the 20th floor.
Sorry, this is the private floor.
This is the private floor?
Yes.
This is where Howard Hughes is staying?
I have no idea, sir. The whole floor is reserved.
I see.
This wasn't private last week.
Are you an employee of the hotel, sir?
I'm not at liberty to say, sir.
Can you tell us for whom you work?
I can't say, sir. Can you please?
All right. Do you work for Howard Hughes?
I don't know anything about Howard Hughes or anything else. Can you please close the door? Thank you.
The reporters and cameramen find this a sort of Mission Impossible scenario. They know that if the real Howard Hughes is holed up on the Bayshore, he most certainly isn't going to stand up. No one knows why he's here. No one knows when he may leave. And meantime, the hotel collects $1,000 a day from the party on the 20th floor. Mike McCourt, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's Innovation Minister, executives from Rogers, and officials with the CRTC were all in the hot seat today. Members of the Commons Industry Committee questioned them about the massive Rogers system outage earlier this month. CBC's Marina von Stackelberg reports.
Rogers Communications CEO Tony Staffieri grilled for an hour over his company's failure.
Would you agree that the services you provide are an essential service in this regard?
We fully appreciate the reliance that Canadians have on our network, and that's why we focus very much, not just on this outage, but how do we fix this going forward?
As a massive provider, the Rogers outage left 12 million customers without cell or internet service. And the number of Canadians impacted in the future could be even higher, as Rogers tries to merge with its rival Shaw.
They have alternative and they have choice.
Wait, you think Canadians have alternative and choice in this marketplace?
Very much so.
And you're saying that with a straight face?
The committee learned today that Rogers didn't inform the government when its network had crashed.
It should not be to the minister to chase the CEO of a major telco in Canada when something like that happened. It should rather be the other way around.
Champagne has demanded Canada's telecoms make a plan to mutually help each other out in a future network crash. But MPs aren't sure what teeth that will have if telecoms don't follow through.
When the Minister of Industry speaks to them, they do ask them to testify.
They didn't even call you.
It's unclear how many emergency calls couldn't be made on Rogers phones. Canada's telecoms regulator knows how many, but the public doesn't. That number has been redacted.
We had procedures in place to ensure that 911 and emergency essential services would switch over to an alternate carrier's network. For very specific technical reasons, that automatic transfer did not happen.
The head of the CRTC says they've barely begun their investigation.
But this was unprecedented, and we now need to focus on how do we assure in this type of situation emergency services are connected.
Some MPs would like to see a wireless customer's bill of rights, similar like the one for airline passengers. Canada's industry minister is promising that this is just the first step to prevent a similar outage from happening again. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The head of the RCMP is defending herself and the government against allegations of political meddling in Canada's deadliest mass shooting. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki answered questions for the first time today, and while she and the government insist nothing untoward happened, other police officers say she brought politics into the mix. CBC's Catherine Cullens reports.
Let me begin and let me be clear. I did not interfere in the investigation around this tragedy.
The tragedy, Canada's worst mass shooting. The allegation that the RCMP commissioner told officers she was under political pressure to reveal publicly what guns were used to help Liberal gun control plans. Commissioner Brenda Lucki is alleged to have said as much to her officers in a phone call. A claim repeated today by yet another officer.
So you heard the commissioner say she promised the minister and the Prime Minister's office?
Yes.
And did the Commissioner Lucki directly tie that to the forthcoming firearm policy from the Liberal government?
Yes.
I actually have a timeline with
The government denies any pressure.
I did not ask the commissioner to reveal that information. She did not promise me that she would. For me, that's a bright line and one I have never crossed.
Lucky says it was Blair's staff who asked if the gun information would be released, but she said that's not offside.
Asking questions is not interference.
She also acknowledged she connected the guns to politics in that conversation with her officers.
What I did recall mentioning was that the reason why the weapons were so important and why they asked if they were going to be included was tied to the minister's mandate letter.
So you did connect the two?
Yes,
correct?
I did.
But she chalks the whole incident up to a misunderstanding.
Would you say the miscommunication is the heart of the issue?
Yeah, I think miscommunication is the heart of many issues.
Lucky says that there was incredible pressure on the RCMP, but from the public, from within the organization, and especially from the media, all looking for more information about such a terrible tragedy. A search for answers that is still underway more than 2 years later. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
With the heat wave looming, some areas of the city are going to be hotter than others. The problem of urban heat islands and what to do about them. That's coming up. And it's 6:44 p.m. and there's a look at sunny Kamloops tonight. It's a sizzling 33 degrees right now, but set to get even hotter. Johanna has a look at the heat wave that will hit much of BC. That's next.
The Yukon, for all its beauty, is a land of wreckage. Ever since the gold rush, people have come and gone, leaving behind their debris. In the tiny Yukon community of Beaver Creek, Sid Vanderbeek has a private museum of all the things he's pulled out of the bush over the years.
I got collections from the back in the gold rush days and from Alaska Highway building memorabilia and things like that, and I decided to make some buildings to make it look like, to display the stuff, and I build the buildings so they look like they're old too, you know. That's where I get my haircut, in this barbershop right here. This old chair is from Dawson City. That's from the gold rush days. This keeps me going, keeps me alive. This kind of stuff. Instead of sitting in the house watching TV, I'm out here playing around with stuff.
What's the prime prop from?
My plane.
Your plane?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Oh, I kind of I landed in Burwas Airport and I hit a gopher hole and flipped over. I have a truck back here. It was an old Army truck used on the building of the highway.
So where did you get this U.S. military stuff?
Around here in the old camps, Donjack Camp and White River Camp. That's where I got most of the lumber from, too. And all the windows you see on these buildings here are all from old Army buildings, too.
So these were highway construction camps?
Yeah, highway construction camps. Yeah, yeah, Army.
It's all American?
American Army, yeah. They left everything. They just packed up and probably walked away or jumped on one big truck or bus and headed out, left their equipment, left everything behind. Yeah. They wanted to get home, I guess.
And it just goes to show you again, stuff in the Yukon that's lost turns up.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of stuff sitting around.
So what stories have you heard over the years about this missing airplane?
Just not really that much. It's just that the plane has been missing for years and years and years and never was found.
You know, a plane full of 44 people going missing is a big deal. Why do you think more people don't know about it?
It wasn't, they didn't have the media stuff like you do nowadays, of course. There was very little communication up here. Most of the time we didn't even have telephone. We didn't have no radio, we didn't have no TV, we didn't have any of that stuff when I first came up here. No, I just hear these stories over the years, you know, and more so 50 years ago than now.
Do you think it'll ever be found?
You know what, I really couldn't say. I would even hesitate to say anything because I don't have a clue.
To a terrifying scene in Texas today. At least 14 homes were torched by a grass fire in a Dallas suburb. The fire started near a highway before moving into the residential neighborhood. Temperatures in Texas are breaking records, with highs hovering above 40 degrees, and that's led to high fire ratings in parts of the state. And for those living in large urban centers, heat waves can feel much, much worse. Jayla Bernstein explains the correlation between our urban environment and the heat we're experiencing in cities and what can be done about it.
We already know that heat waves are getting more intense and more frequent because of climate change. But if you're standing in the middle of a city, like I am right now in downtown Montreal, that heat is going to actually feel worse because of how the city around me is built up. So if we look down here, here's an example. This concrete below me, this flat, hard concrete, this actually traps heat and kind of beams it back at us, making us feel warmer when we're in a city. Or take this road behind me, this asphalt, dark black road, that makes the surrounding environment feel warmer. And so do these buildings. These dark colored buildings, they're not great for keeping a city cool. You want lighter colors. That's what engineers and scientists say if you want to try and cool down the surrounding environment. Now, there are solutions to this. The fact that when we're in cities, we're more vulnerable to heat. Some of those solutions, well, let's take a look. More greenery like this is a big one. If you talk to advocates, to climate scientists, they say just this little shrub, more of this kind of thing can actually help cool people down in cities. Also, removing asphalt, having more grassy areas like this can improve the way that the environment feels during a heat wave. Or even trees like this one. This one's still pretty young, so it's not giving much shade, but as it grows up, it'll cast more shade, and that can actually make a real difference. The more trees, the more vegetation that we have in our surrounding environment in cities. Now, another big thing that some engineers and architects are calling for in Canada is for us to think about adapting our old buildings, especially those old apartment buildings where a lot of vulnerable tenants live and unfortunately are sometimes suffering during heat waves. Adapting those buildings to be better ventilated could make a big difference. And then finally, there's the big one, which is cutting emissions. If we want heat waves to be less frequent, if we want to avoid them getting any worse in Canada, well, of course, that means preventing climate change from getting any worse. And what climate scientists say needs to happen is for us to cut emissions. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us again. A good reminder from Jayla there. And from scientists, of course, it's all about cutting carbon emissions, reducing climate change effects, and hopefully we don't get as many of these big heat waves that we're about to experience.
You're right. And also so many good points in there about the difference that tree canopy can make in a city. And we've seen that, of course, firsthand here in Metro Vancouver. Places in East Vancouver, the downtown east side, no tree canopy, no retrofitting to those older buildings. That's where temperatures were 7+ degrees warmer than other parts of Metro Vancouver. Let me take you to our temperature forecast right now. This is all going to come into play in the heat wave we're in right now. That's why it's good advice to seek out those cooling shelters, especially if you are in a location where you're seeing those amplified impacts of the urban heat island. 24 right now in through YVR. Watch this. Here's a look at that forecast for tomorrow. 34 for parts of Metro Vancouver. Now, YVR, you can see down on the bottom left there, 28, but still quite a jump from where we are today. I want to show you those forecast temperatures for the interior. Thursday, mid to high 30s. The forecast for the interior, maybe a day behind the heat for the South Coast. So your peak heat really coming Wednesday, Thursday, but it's elevated tomorrow through to the weekend. 41 for the Southern Okanagan, 37 for Kelowna. This is without the humidex factor. So getting close to 40 in Kelowna by Thursday with that humidex, that'll be low 40s. These are challenging all-time July records. Just to remind you, last year, the heat dome, we got into the mid to high 40s. So still not quite as hot, but this is dangerously hot. And I'm seeing a lot of comparisons to the 2009 heat wave. Of course, last year, unfortunately, over 600 people died. Back in 2009, a very similar setup weather-wise. We had almost 200 heat-related deaths during that weather setup. So this is still very dangerous. Watch as I take you through that long-range forecast. Heading out to Monday, starting to see some cooler air. Still elevated, still above seasonal, but coming down a little bit. So again, expect temperatures inland to hit the 30s, Lien, over the next couple of days. UV index will be high, and as we've been mentioning, fire danger also very high. So it's into the long haul for us. This is not going to be just a couple days event. We'll still be talking about this by the week.
Okay, lots to watch for. Thank you so much for that, Joe.
You're welcome.
They are making components for one of the most high-tech jets in the world, the F-35. We take you inside a Richmond factory coming up.
It's awesome to, finally hear that the Pope is coming and he's coming to give an in-person apology.
The only reason I feel that the Pope is coming to apologize is they've now discovered all the bodies and there's no way they can say, no, this didn't happen anymore. Because for years they denied these things. For years, these things were not public for years. But I grew up hearing these stories from my uncles, my aunties, my dad.
To me, the Pope's visit is a seed in processing the traumas caused in residential schools.
I really hope this visit opens up a lot of hearts and a lot of eyes.
But I do believe that intergenerational trauma is real and that it's a ripple effect from what happened in the residential schools to, 3 generations down. I'm a 3rd generation survivor, and I've definitely been through, the alcoholism, addiction, the abuse.
He's not the one who did it, but because of the position that he is in, I feel like a lot of people will tack that on him.
I don't know the Pope personally. He could be a wonderful guy. It's just what he represents as a whole.
It's mostly up to the elders and the people that went through it, that they should decide if they want to accept this apology or not.
There's still so much schools that are still needing to be searched, and there's going to undoubtedly be more children going to be found. So, I think for us, we, deserve a little bit more action and stuff for, from the Pope anyway.
Canada has a chance to fix everything. Canada has a chance to change, and it has a chance to change all of the things it did. See, it's not been Canada couldn't do it, it's that Canada didn't want to do it. The church didn't want to do it. They didn't want to acknowledge anything. They didn't want to look at any of this.
I think the Pope's visit and his apology and just this whole situation we find ourselves in allows us to have discussions around our healing, around our forgiveness and trust, all of which take time.
It's a veritable Top Gun kind of job. A factory in Delta is making the wings of a very notable airplane. The CBC's Caroline Chen takes us inside. Take a look.
My name is Amandeep Kaur. I'm the CEO of Avcorp Industries. Please come and have a look at our F-35 assembly area for the outboard wing for the C variant. This program we've been working on since in sort of the inception of it, and every countries were still still deciding, to develop this plane. This is the what we call the outboard wing assembly of the F-35 carrier variant. If you can see from the banner there, that's the outside portion of the wing that we assemble. For it to land on the ship, you need a larger and a stronger wing because one, this thing's fast, and when you're coming to land, you need to really slow it down. We complete everything that's on there, and when it goes to the Fort Worth facility, it basically few pins to assemble to the aircraft itself, and then it's ready to go. We're the only one in the world who are building this. Right here in Vancouver, we're the only company that has all the tools and been awarded this work. And this work is awarded to us even before Canadian government had decided that they were going to go for this, to go into negotiations to with the Lockheed Martin for the F-35 program. Every time when we go and tell the story, everybody gets excited. Well, that's how I came into, when I knew this company, what they were doing, I was excited to join, and I'm here 23 years later.
That was very cool to see. Thanks for bringing that piece, Caroline. All right, that does it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us on CBC News Vancouver at 6. Dan Burt will have your late newscast at 11 tonight after the National. And we will leave you tonight with more scenes from the Pope's first day in Canada and Musqueam, Alberta. Take care.